So this is our presentation for landmarks in editing and VFX. So as we all know, early editing is basically established upon the discovery of the jump cut in the late 19th century by French filmmaker Georges Méliès when he had a technical difficulty with his camera. So basically, Méliès discovered that by cutting to different shots, you could push forward the narrative as he does with A Trip to the Moon. Personally, I believe that he saw the camera and the means of editing as more technical aspects of recording a stage play, because the camera doesn't move the entirety of the film, and I think that is where D.W. Griffith comes in. So D.W. Griffith directed Intolerance and The Birth of a Nation, and he's widely credited with the invention or discovery of a lot of editing techniques such as cross-cutting. But some people have suggested that Griffith rather systemized and popularized some techniques rather than actually inventing them. So this is a statement made by theorist Roman Byrne, as well as Charlie Keel, in the book A Companion to D.W. Griffith. So there is evidence of cross-cutting being used predating any of Griffith's works. So for example, The Great Train Robbery in 1903 does this, and so does The Runaway Horse in 1908. So both of these predate Griffith even getting into film. So I wanted to have a look at the origins of montage editing because we've talked a lot about continuity. So as we all know, again, montage editing was founded by Lev Kuleshov at Moscow Film School. There were many other Soviet filmmakers such as Dziga Vertov and then Sergei Eisenstein. Eisenstein hypothesized that there were 5 different types of montage editing. So the first one is intellectual, which is a combination of shots used to provoke different emotions within the audience. So in Eisenstein's film Strike in 1925, you could argue that this scene is used to maybe create anger, excitement, maybe even sympathy for the workers. So metric montage establishes a pace, and the rule of metric montage is that you have to cut after a certain amount of time or a number of frames. So this happens in yet another piece of Eisenstein's work that you've just seen, October in 1928. So rhythmic montage, I believe, is very similar to metric montage in the sense that there is pacing to the cuts, but instead of establishing a pace, rhythmic montage has to keep up with the pace. So for example, in The Breakfast Club, the dance montage, there's like a rhythm to keep up with in terms of the music. Tonal montage is essentially a montage that is built up of shots that are similar in subject, and this is done to build on a theme. So an example of this is The Hunger in 1983. Finally, we have overtonal, which is essentially the culmination of the other types of montage. So this elicits a strong emotional response from the audience. This is again done by Eisenstein in Battleship Potemkin in 1925, in the Odessa step sequence.
And I'll talk about modern editing. One of the main differences between modern and early editing would be the technology that we have available. These technologies and digital nonlinear editing systems has changed the way that editors work. It has also increased the speed of the post-production process with the ease of cutting and placing together scenes, with software such as Resolve creating effects, for example a fade, with a simple tap of a key. This advancement in software and the abilities available gives the editor more freedom and opportunity to experiment, but also the way the filming is done now has changed the way we edit. Popular media in the modern era has changed how we watch shows and films and what we expect. As Edgar Bergson, the ex-editor-in-chief of MTV, explains, there needs to be movement, and if not, there needs to be a cut. So we intensify the viewing experience by shortening our edits. Instant audio-visual gratification without much brain activity. This has changed the way films are made. One example of this being used to the extreme is the film Resident Evil: The Final Chapter. In this 1-minute fight scene, there are 118 separate cuts. I'll play a small bit of that now. This scene can demonstrate the impact of this mindset of quick cuts needing to be used and how it can damage the film instead. However, just because one film struggles to use quick cuts and quick shots does not mean it's always bad. Edgar Wright, who could be described by some as an auteur, has perfected the use of quick cuts, some may say. All his films are scattered with quick cuts, and his most recent film, Baby Driver, is no different. During car chases, there'll be quick cuts to gear changes, police vehicles or guns. In other scenes, quick cuts to objects such as a phone or a coffee cup. While this is different from his other films like The World's End, with quick cuts in the pubs, he still uses them to add the tension, makes the audience focus on something or to provoke the audience to feel something. Writers constantly use editing and its modern style to invoke feelings, most often humour, in the audience. The reason why he does these quick cuts so well is that he does not overuse them, like the previous example. In the previous example, we get unnecessary cuts to shots we had already seen, but from a different angle. Edgar Wright shows different parts of a scene, something that may be slightly out of shot, for example. The previous also uses them constantly, or Wright will only use them for effect at a specific moment. The main part for working out when the best time to cut, though, is finding the beats to cut on, which is what Wright does so well. Different genres mean different pacing, though, as Mark Levolsky explains using Marley and Me as an example. We never outstay our welcome in those early scenes, and that is one of the mandates of editing comedy. People become invested through laughter, through enjoyment of the experience of watching comedy. The minute they become bored or the film loses its focus, you risk losing them. With all this considered, there is a certain style to editing in the modern day, and it's certainly changed based upon media and the genres themselves changing through time, and also with the technology that we are using. It is likely that there will be more evolution to editing in the future also.
Early VFX. In this part of the presentation, I will be exploring the birth of a genre, the concept and detail of how much planning went into early VFX and a popular style of film which is film noir. VFX can help the viewer identify what genre they are watching. Genres are so common throughout various arenas of cultural practice that their definitions can often seem like givens. So basically, we all agree upon a basic understanding of what a sitcom is, so no further elaboration is needed. This example of Metropolis 1927 helps us identify the genre by having matte paintings created in the film and stylizing the birth of sci-fi. These matte paintings are basically double exposure. Working with film was a very complicated process with VFX because you had to plan every specific detail and know what light is hitting what, for example. The coverage approach generates a great deal of footage and many editing options. This was all about how they shot La La Land and the thought processes they went through to plan the finished film. We see this same type of thought process in almost every single film being planned. For example, in Star Wars, because it was shot in film, they had to plan every single shot that was going to be composited. There was no such thing as digital back then.
We're so used to thinking of things as being stacked these days in the computer. You have your layers. You can't work that way with film, because once you expose something onto film, you can't just expose something on top of where you just exposed something. You'll get a double exposure. And so that's why you need these black and white pieces of film, because they actually block light from going through. That little mat will make it so only the part where the X-wing is getting light. A little X-wing shaped silhouette is blocking any light from hitting where the X-wing element was already exposed. So it's not stacked, it's actually everything's basically cut out and having to be perfectly aligned with itself.
Working with film like this is such a complicated process because you had to know exactly how everything was going to lie down in the final product before you even started filming any of that.
We're so used to thinking of things as being...
Film noir. Key features of noir include black and white images, urban locations, unraveling mystery of the narrative, and the enigma often being a woman. To place on Peterson's catalogue, I would add only the use of black and white film stock, which is not transitional for the time, but is still an essential part of noir visual style. By this he means black and white images is a must when producing noir-style films, along with the mystery of being unfolded as the narrative and the use of specific dark lighting techniques. For example, we see all of these key features in the film Maltese Falcon, 1941. It is black and white, the lighting is very dark, and the enigma is in fact a woman.
We were talking about a lot more money than this.
There are more of us to be taken care of now.
Well, that may be, but I've got the Falcon.
You may have the Falcon, but we certainly have you.
I take another riding from you I'm gonna take. Get up and shoot it out.
Stop it, the police will be here any minute. Now talk.
Oh, how can you accuse me of such a terrible...
This isn't the time for that schoolgirl act. We're both of us sitting under the gallows.
In this section, I'll talk about how the relationship of modern visual effects with television has changed, as well as the way that they've changed in being achieved technically. Visual effects can range from the subtlest of changes to an image, to the creation of new impossible worlds. It's the latter that most people think of when they hear the term visual effects. However, for a long time the spectacle of VFX is something that television was lacking. TV productions were often confined to what they could create in real life for shooting. As Chapter 3 of Lotz's The Television Will Be Revolutionised illustrates, the reason for this is largely economic. TV was often viewed as below film and thus lacked star power and workforce experience needed for it to be seen as a platform where VFX heavy content would be popular enough to recuperate the immense costs of creation. In the modern day, this is significantly changed thanks to the existence of, as Orloff said, alternate distribution models, such as streaming platforms like Netflix and Amazon. Orloff said that the different distribution models allow more time for effects to be developed and reach feature level quality. This, alongside increased budgets for visual effects, has meant that what a viewer expects from TV has heightened. It could be viewed as a positive feedback loop. When the quality of effects increases, so do the viewership numbers for these shows, which in turn incentivises even higher budgets for the subsequent series. An example of a show that's on an alternative distribution platform is The Mandalorian. It's set in a visual effects heavy Star Wars universe, and the franchise originated as films but eventually expanded into other mediums. This only goes to show how television is now seen as a viable option for such a cult franchise and others alike. The Mandalorian uses some of the most cutting edge visual effects technology in the form of an LED volume stage, which allows for computer generated photorealistic media to be displayed and filmed real time, with the actors in the shot. Rogue One 2016 helped pioneer this with 9mm pixel resolution LED panels. The Mandalorian since used this film level technology and pushed it further with just 2.8mm panels. Once again, it shows how television is now seen as on par with film and what can be achieved in it. The example of Mandalorian leads into how modern visual effects has technically developed. Before digital methods existed, most VFX were done in camera, with projection and matte painting techniques being the bread and butter. As digital techniques advanced, real environments and sets were more commonly swapped out for green screen. This allowed for the captured subject to be put into whatever setting or scene desired. Green screen usage was especially prevalent during the early 2000s, and it's still used today. Rather than having robust sets and props to interact with, actors quite often had to do their whole performance to nothing except a green or blue room. An example of this is the Star Wars prequel trilogy. You can see Ewan McGregor talk about that here.
At that point, it became more and more blue screen and green screen, and so I thought it was a shame. You know, in the first one, I worked with Yoda, like he was on set. Frank Goz, I think, was operating him with this team of people, and I had scenes with Yoda. It was amazing. Like, it's like working with a star that you've known all your life. You're like, working with Yoda today, and it.
Even a veteran actor found having a set that he could see and interact with made for a much more engaging filming experience, which ultimately led to a better performance from them. The Mandalorian improves on this by mixing both the digital and in-camera ways of production. The LED screens allow for live, extensive sets that the actors can see and react to, whilst at the same time uses real objects on set to integrate the two seamlessly, with minimal amounts of compositing in post-production.
And we started to realize, well, let's not just do green screen and interactive light. If we're going to design the whole set and game engine ahead of time, maybe we could have some in-camera effects.
As you can see, this technology is still in its early stages, and it's not the be-all and end-all. More established techniques are still used for a production like The Mandalorian. However, it is very likely that this technique will be even more prominent in the workflow of many films and TV shows alike as time progresses.